Yes, ma'am. Okay. Pray for Harold having some heart issues. Spoke with her just a little while ago, and she said she's feeling better, but not well enough to be out. In fact, she asked us specifically to pray for her this evening. So continue to pray for Cora. Matt not Rose, Matt Holcomb. We've been praying for him. He's the one who spoke for me on a Wednesday night, not that far back. And they're still trying to get everything in order with Duke Hospital, and it's got some medical stuff that's coming up as a result of some hemorrhaging on his brain and some other things as well. So just pray for Matt and Abby. Anyone else? Had a bunch of requests that came in Sunday. Just pray for each of those. Some dealing with cancer, some dealing with some heart issues, different things that are going on. Yes, ma'am. Especially as 4th of July approaches, we should be praying for our nation all the time, but especially now as well. Kadar, would you mind leading us in prayer this evening? Amen. Again, it's a privilege to be with y'all this evening. I'm glad everybody's here tonight. I do want to just take care of 3 housekeeping things for you. To begin with, on Friday of this week, we have 4th of July. So it's 2 days away. It seems like it has snuck up on us, even though it really hasn't. But we have a fireworks event that will take place here at the church, and we start at 8 o'clock on Friday night, and we would love to have as many folks as possible come on out and just be a part of celebrating our nation, and at the same time being grateful for what the Lord has provided to us. In the past, we've started earlier, but it was really a good amount of dead time, almost to the point that it was too much. So we've backed it off. We start at 8 o'clock. The fireworks won't start until closer to about 9:15 or 9:20. Obviously, we got to wait until it gets closer to dark before we can do that. But if you've seen in one of these offices over here, we've got a ton of fireworks that we're planning on lighting off on Friday night. So we'd love to have folks. If you've got family, neighbors, you've got friends, you've got coworkers, whomever it may be, who maybe they're looking for a place to be able to enjoy fireworks, I will tell you that on the night of 4th of July, we are the only show in town. There are no other fireworks in the central area on Friday night. There's one in Clemson on Thursday night, and then there was one in Pendleton earlier this week, and there's one in 6 Mile, I believe theirs is Sunday night, and there's all these different times that they're doing it, but we're the only ones doing it on Friday night. So if you talk to people and they're asking where can we go for the 4th of July fireworks, they should be coming here. We'd love to have them, and it'll be a great time. So just wanted to personally invite each of you as well. This Sunday, everything is according to our normal schedule. However, I also want to just remind everybody that starting next Wednesday night, we have our family camp that will be taking place. That is Wednesday the 9th through Sunday the 13th. So on the Wednesday night and the Sunday night of that week, we will not have our evening services. We'll still have our morning service on Sunday the 13th, but on Wednesday night the 9th, we encourage people to come up to the family camp that's up at Table Rock Wesleyan Campground up off Highway 11. And if you've not been up there, you are missing out because it's a great experience. And I will tell you that sometimes people light fires just so the firefighters can come and stay there. Actually, I say that humorously because that's where typically all of the firefighters have been staying when we've had fires most recently. But it's more than that. It's a place for us just to be able to spend some time worshiping and digging a little bit deeper into the Word. So again, that's the 9th through the 13th. Our speaker this year for the camp is someone who has spoken for me here at the church before. His name is Jim Dunn, and he is a fantastic speaker and will do a great job. And we'd love to have as many folks come for that as well as possible. There are some special events throughout the week. There's a BYF day. There's a pastor's day. There's an ice cream thing that they do on one of the days. There's one night where they feed everybody Mexican food, which is fantastic. And all this stuff it's just a part of the camp, but it's really about coming together, worshiping, and just being reminded of the Lord's presence. So next Wednesday night, there is no Wednesday night Bible study here at the church. That's the message I want you to hear, because I don't want you showing up and saying, well, how come nobody told me we didn't have? Every time the youth have an event, and they tell people, hey, we're not going to be having an event, our regular Sunday night or Wednesday night service, you can guarantee somebody's going to show up. And they're going to think, well, nobody said anything, but we know better, because the fact is sometimes teens don't always listen. And sometimes, I hate to admit it, sometimes adults don't listen well either. So one last update, and this is just actually someone asked me about it ahead of time, but I actually had it in my notes to mention to y'all. Continue to pray for our mission team as we prepare to go to Costa Rica. And our team has been preparing for a while and looking forward to a great event as we're going to be there July the 19th through the 26th. And we've been doing fundraising, and someone asked me tonight where we're at in our fundraising. We're actually really, really close to reaching our fundraising goal. We're less than 500 as of this past Sunday. We're less than $500 away from reaching that fundraising goal, which is actually fantastic. And we believe the Lord will provide for that, but it's just another reason to just celebrate the Lord's providing for us to be able to go. And one of the things that we're going to be doing different this time, I know that this is getting a little bit off track, but in the past we've gone, and it's almost always more as a work team. And there have been times that we've worked with smaller groups, sometimes kids, sometimes adults. This time there'll be a significant focus on the children's ministry while we're there. We're still going to do some of the work project stuff too. But actually, we're doing salvation bracelets with the kids and sharing the gospel message with them. And it's going to be a great opportunity for us just to show these kids Christ. And we're looking forward to being able to do that. There are 10 of us that are going. So just pray for us as we go. And I feel like the Lord's going to bless us. So tonight, I want us to move on to the next section within Judges. And I will tell you that this is a 3-chapter section. We are not going to look at all 3 chapters tonight. So pretty much what's going to end up happening is we're going to look at 1 chapter tonight, and then next week we're taking off. So it'll take a little while to get through the 3 chapters that are covered here. But we're looking at, as with Samson, there was a longer passage of scripture to be able to cover his, because there were so many things that were a part of it. Well, tonight introduces us to a really ugly and crazy part of the book of Judges. And I want us to be able to spend some time just kind of focusing on some of this stuff as opposed to just rushing through it. That's why we're not covering all 3 chapters tonight. I want to begin by reading the first 10 verses to you in Judges chapter 19. And it begins with a statement that we have heard already and we will continue to hear. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' home in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay. So he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day, they got up early, and he prepared to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. Afterward, the woman's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the woman's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning, you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. Now, as we look at this story, it's actually a little bit humorous what is taking place here, but there are some really important things in the background that are worthy of our attention. To begin with, again in verse 1, this familiar statement that we have heard already and we will hear again, Israel had no king. And what that means is basically they did not have accountability. There were things that would take place, and there's nobody to tell them, hey, you know what, you're going to be punished for this. And basically there was free reign. You can do pretty much whatever you want. There were all kinds of sinful behaviors that we see that will take place. And you will see that very heavily in our passage tonight. There's a sense of permissiveness because there's nobody standing over you with their whip ready to hold you accountable. Now, as we talk about all kinds of sinfulness, there is actually a practice that is talked about in here tonight that we talk about it so often in Scripture as if it is an acceptable practice, but actually it's never something that God ordained. And it is the use of concubines. Actually, in our passage tonight, we're told of a Levite who took a concubine basically from Bethlehem in Judah. Just doing a little bit of research. By the way, in our passage, it refers to her as a concubine, but it refers to her father as the father-in-law. So does that mean that she's actually his wife, or is she the concubine? Actually, in the Bible, a concubine was a woman acquired by a man as a secondary wife. Her purpose was to provide a male heir in the case of a barren wife, to provide more children in general, to enhance the family's workforce and wealth, and to satisfy the man's sexual desires. A concubine was endowed with certain rights and protections by Hebrew law, but was not equal to the status of a wife. Often, the child of a concubine might even be viewed as less than equal according to the other children basically born to a wife as opposed to a concubine. Although God provided rights and protections for concubines in the law of Moses, God did not introduce or approve of this marital model. I know that a lot of people had concubines, but actually we never see God saying, go and take a concubine. The Hebrew word for concubine, I'm going to try to pronounce this, and I'm probably not going to get it right, but none of y'all are going to know, so it's okay. The Hebrew word for concubine was pilegesh. It isn't even a Hebrew word. It doesn't have a Hebrew origin. It is what's known as a non-Semitic loan word that is borrowed to refer to a phenomenon not indigenous to Israel. In other words, there were other neighboring nations that they practiced the use of concubines. And as the Israelites interacted with these other neighboring nations, basically they needed a term to describe this practice that they did not necessarily have given to them by God. There's an author and theologian, his name is David Baker, and he said this: in the ancient Near East, it was acceptable for a married man to have a secondary wife or concubine so long as he had the resources to support a large family. So in other words, if you are wealthy enough and you can handle taking care of your wife and you still got a little bit of extra money and you want to have someone else, you could go ahead and take a concubine as well. Now, we do know that, especially in the New Testament, we see it very clearly defined that a man is to be the husband of but one wife. But in the Old Testament, there are examples where we see concubines actually a part of the Jewish structure. It's not unique to the Jewish people, though. Remember, this doesn't necessarily originate with God. In fact, often it creates a problem. Let me give you some examples of concubines that we have in the Old Testament. The first one is one that all of us will be somewhat familiar with. It was actually a handmaid of Sarah. It was her servant girl, yet she is given to Abraham to have a child with him because Sarah was unable to bear a child. Her name is Hagar. It's recorded in Genesis chapter 16, and she becomes basically the secondary wife for Abraham. In fact, it begins to create conflict between Sarah and Abraham. It creates conflict between Sarah and Hagar. And they end up as rivals with each other, and it's because of the fact that basically it's not the way God really intended it to take place. God had given a promise to Abraham that you will be the father of many nations. And after a while, after trying to be patient, Abraham decides he'll take things into his own hands. Sarah decides to take things into her own hands. She's actually the one who recommends taking Hagar as a concubine. But that being said, clearly she would be an example of it. There's another lady also connected to Abraham. Her name is Keturah. This is Abraham's second wife after Sarah dies. She is recorded as a wife in Genesis 25, verse 1, but is recorded as a concubine in 1 Chronicles 1:32. And Genesis 25:6, just 5 verses after she's referenced as a wife, in Genesis 25:1. In Genesis 25:6, it suggests that Keturah was Abraham's concubine. So his love, his true love, was for his wife Sarah. But after she was gone, he took another woman to be his concubine. There is another one that's mentioned. Her name is Rizpah. And she was a concubine of King Saul, and her story is recorded in 2 Samuel chapter 3, verses 7 through 11. And actually, an interesting aspect of this relationship, there was a rival to King Saul. His name was Abner. And he would actually sleep with Rizpah and defile her. And there was actually an element of that it was all about political gain. Basically, by sleeping with Saul's concubine, typically a concubine connected to a king, when that king was overthrown, his wives and his concubines basically became the property of the next king. So what Abner is doing is basically he is saying, I should be the next king. And he was taking advantage of that. Actually, in 2 Samuel chapter 15 and chapter 16 and chapter 20, we actually see reference to 10 concubines of King David. And then in 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 8, and I think we talked about this recently as well, but Solomon had 300 concubines as well. Now, this is a side note, but it's really important. You remember we started in verse 1, and it tells us that Israel had no king. And that statement is intended to identify a lack of accountability and a lack of following the laws and people leaning towards sinful behavior. But if you listen to what I just said, I shared with you all these examples of people who had concubines, and there were 3 kings that were included. Saul, David, and Solomon, all 3 had concubines. The presence of a king does not necessarily make a godly kingdom. Instead, it just means that there might be some more accountability, but the presence of a king does not make all of the wrongs right. David, Solomon, and Saul, all 3, apparently also had concubines. Now, because this individual is a secondary wife, there were certain expectations that were still on this wife. Faithfulness was one of those. And according to this passage, it tells us that the concubine of this Levite was unfaithful. But not unfaithful in the manner that she went off and had a sexual relationship with some other guy. There's actually a prophet. His name is, why did I even bring it up if I couldn't remember his name? Wife's name is Gomer. Who's Hosea? Hosea. Yes, thank you, Hosea. Hosea had an unfaithful wife named Gomer, and she continually went back to her adulterous ways. That's a different kind of unfaithfulness to what we see here. It doesn't tell us that she went out and found another man, but rather she was unfaithful and went back to her father. And needless to say, if dad has already sent her away to be the concubine or the secondary wife to this man, there's a sense of unfaithfulness because now you have left your father to go be a part of this family. Actually, I'm reminded of Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, where it says, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So often, even in today's culture, it is hard to cut the ties from our parents. And what you see here is you've got a woman who she has gone to another man's home, and that is now her basically husband, yet she wants to go back and be with her parents, her father, instead. One side note here is the Levite is not content, even though she is a secondary wife, she is a concubine, he is not content with her leaving. It actually tells me that he apparently did have a love for this woman because he goes to seek her out. He goes to the home of her father, believing that she will be there. And it doesn't tell us that he is ugly with her. It doesn't tell us that he is angry with her, but rather he goes with the hope of convincing her to return home with him. But as we look at this story, you see a bit of a struggle for both the father and the daughter. On the daughter's part, she's already returned home. Clearly she was homesick. Clearly she wanted to be with her father and she wanted to be there. Well, apparently the father wasn't too excited about her leaving either. And we know that because when the man gets up to leave with his wife, his secondary wife, his concubine, however you want to call it, when they get up to leave, the father says, I'll tell you what, why don't you stay for a little while? Just enjoy yourself and we'll eat and we'll have a good time. You can be well rested. why don't you stick around for about 3 days? Take your time. This is actually a great time. And the husband says, okay, we'll do that. After 3 days, day 4 comes along, and it's time to pack up. Let's go. We're ready for our journey. And the dad says, you know what, before you leave, why don't you rest a little bit longer? We'll share another meal, and we'll enjoy our time together. And the husband says, all right, you know what, we'll do it. They get up on the 5th day. The dad says, you know what, you don't really want to leave yet. Why don't you stay and let's eat for a little while? And the husband says, okay, let's do it. The afternoon comes, and again, the father-in-law, you know what, it's getting close to dark already. Maybe it'd just be better if you stayed. Maybe you could leave tomorrow morning. Well, this husband's not dumb. He knows what's going on here. The father doesn't want him to leave, not because he doesn't care about that guy, but he doesn't want his daughter to leave. There's a struggle that's taking place there, and finally the husband says, you know what, we got to go. Here's something. First of all, remember the passage I read to you from Genesis 2, verse 24 a minute ago. God had already laid out certain things, and there were certain expectations. And if the people of God did not abide by those expectations, eventually they would get themselves in trouble. They've allowed concubines, and I gave you examples where it became stumbling blocks even to the people of Israel. The clearest example of that was with Hagar, but often it did become a problem. I will tell you that the fact that there is no king in Israel would affect them in many, many different ways. You would actually see a very twisted culture where certain things that we would look at and think, that's just weird, like who thinks that way? It had become commonplace and normal among the people of Israel. So you have this delayed departure, and finally, on the 5th day in the afternoon, even though it's relatively late in the day, they decide to leave. I will tell you that this delayed departure, the afternoon departure, forced them to break up the trip. And it becomes a huge stumbling block to this Levite and his concubine. Had they left early in the morning, they would not have stopped in the city where they will stop. They would have been able to probably make it all the way from the beginning point to the ending point, because this man had already traveled to come to his father-in-law's home. And apparently he didn't have a problem doing that, but because it's so late in the day, they find themselves having to stop for the night. Look, beginning in verse 11. I'll read through verse 17 here. It says, when they were near Jebus, and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night. His master replied, no, we won't go into any city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah. He added, come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah and spend the night in one of those places. So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah in Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. And that evening, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, he came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, where are you going? And where did you come from? Now, as we look at this interaction, again, they're on a trip, they're traveling. Now, there have been many times where I've traveled and I didn't know where we were going to stop for the night. Last summer, we took Alyssa, actually it's been maybe a little bit longer than that, we took Alyssa on a little bit of a tour. She wanted to be able to check out some other colleges and universities. Well, you know where I wanted her to be, because I wanted her to be local so she could be close to me. One of the places she wanted to go was to Oklahoma Wesleyan University. Great school. Jim Dunn, the guy that I mentioned, is going to be speaking at our camp. He's a good friend of mine, and Actually, he is the president at Oklahoma Wesleyan University. So I called him up and said, hey, we want to come out for a visit. And we arranged, and we actually were able to stay at their house and to just spend some time with them. But you know what I did as we drove out there? I wanted her to know exactly how far away this place was. So I drove the speed limit the entire way. And it was a long, long ride. On the way back, she looks over at me and she says, wow, this is a long rest. I know it is. And it worked. So she ended up here at Southern Wesleyan. But we didn't know where we were going to stop. We just literally jumped in the car. We had a route that we were going to take, but we didn't know where we were going to stop for the night, much like they don't know exactly where they're going to stop. They come to a town, it's Jebus or Jebus, depending on how you pronounce it. It's the town where the Jebusites lived. Now, the Jebusites were not Jews. That means they are Gentiles. And the servant who is walking alongside or riding alongside with this Levite says, why don't we stop here? We'll go into Jebus and we'll figure out a place to stay there. Well, the Levite says, no way. We're not stopping in some Gentile town. We'll find one of the Jewish towns nearby, either Gibeah or Ramah. Ramah's mentioned there, but they end up not going to Ramah. They end up in Gibeah at basically just as it's starting to get dark. There is this idea that a Gentile town would not be as good as a Jewish town. Part of the reason is they likely viewed the Gentiles as more primitive, more worldly, less godly. And they thought to themselves, if only we could get to a Jewish town, then we'd be okay for the night. I'll give you a comparison. You got a Gentile town versus a Jewish town. This would be like you're traveling and you're pulling through Seattle. And you're thinking to yourself, I bet we could find a place to stay there in Seattle, but you've got Central right down the road. Which one do you want to stay at? Do you want to go to Seattle or do you want to come here? The reality is most of us are going to feel safer if we go to Central than we are to Seattle. Now, I just picked Seattle as a random place. You can put whatever city you want there. You get the point. Because it wasn't a Jewish town, because there was a reputation for the Gentiles to be more immoral, there was this idea that we don't want to go there, but let's go to the Jewish city because that's where we'll be safe. There were certain expectations that were upon the people. There's a fly that's driving me crazy up here, sorry. There were certain expectations that were on the people. The Jews will be more godly, the Gentiles will not. As they approach this city, they come to the city square or the town square, and they basically go and they sit and wait. When you had company that came, individuals who visited town, typically you had a responsibility to take care of them. You remember the story when Abraham is approached by two individuals who are traveling, and basically they turn out to be angels. Well, among the Jewish people, there is this idea that they might be entertaining angels. So when company came to town, you typically would find a way to minister to them and to take care of them. But as this Levite and his concubine and his servant gather in the town square, nobody says anything to him. Finally, this old guy comes, and he is an Ephraimite, not a Benjamite. Remember, this town is in the region of the Benjamin tribe, so the Benjamites. But it is an Ephraimite who just happens to be living there at that time, working in the fields. He's been working all day, and he has come back, and he sees these people sitting out there, and he goes out and talks with them. I want you to consider, first of all, the fact that this is a very poor reflection of the tribe of Benjamin on the front end. It is likely that there were a lot more Benjamites here than there were Ephraimites. there is one Ephraimite who sees them in need and reaches out. There is no Benjamite that reaches out. That reflects poorly on the Benjamites. Now, forget about the other stuff that's about to take place. On the very front end, we see that there is something that is not right within the Benjamite people. Now, just to let you know who they are, they're from the tribe of Benjamin. Typically, the people who are Benjamites, they had a reputation for being really strong in battle. They were great warriors. There are actually three individuals that we know of as Benjamites, and they matter. In Judges chapter 3, we are introduced to one of the judges. He is a left-handed judge, and his name is Ehud. He's the one who basically, there was a very fat king. In fact, that's the way it's worded in the book of Judges. And he goes in and he basically takes a knife, and I guess the other king would be worried about the left hand, but he takes a knife or a sword with his left hand and he sticks it up inside this really fat king and basically leaves it in there. And he ends up being the judge, the rescuer for the people of Israel. He was a Benjamite, a great warrior, and he would actually help deliver the Israelites at that moment. Another one that has not actually had his story told yet, King Saul, is actually a Benjamite. Now, that's going to be important because although it won't be tonight, the Benjamites will almost entirely be wiped out before this story is over. But God still is going to use the people from the tribe of Benjamin. Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. One other, and this one also becomes a very significant figure. Esther was actually from the tribe of Benjamin. That means that God still had a plan for them, even though they had obviously had a sin problem among them. Understand that God can use ungodly people. And even if you have failed somewhere along the way, it does not mean that God is done writing the story. God, if you will allow him to take the pen back, he can continue to write the story. Anyways, as we look at Judges chapter 19, verse 20 to 28, I skipped a few verses here. I skipped a few verses here. This is what it says. You are welcome at my house. This is the Ephraimite. You are welcome at my house, the old man said. Let me supply whatever you need, only don't spend the night in the square. So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. Just sounds like a good, normal night in a neighboring town. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. What city are we in? This is Gibeah, which is in the tribe of Benjamin. Some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." Remember the reason for not wanting to go to a Gentile town? Because of the ungodliness that existed there, we'd be much better off, much safer if we went to a Jewish town. And we wouldn't have to worry about all the crazy things that other people do. That's exactly what they have to deal with here among the tribe of Benjamin. In verse 23, the owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter." You're talking about this is outrageous. And he turns and he's, "Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him, so the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn they let her go. At daybreak the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there until daylight. And And when her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. Now, we'll go back to the end of this in just a moment, but do you recognize the incredible amount of perversion among the people there in the tribe of Benjamin? These are the people who should be godly. They should be doing what is right. But there is incredible evil that existed there. It actually tells us that some of the wicked men of Benjamin are actually the ones who show up that night. Some of the wicked men. We've already talked about the fact that there is a spirit that is not correct among the people of Benjamin. There was unkindness that took place. You've got guests that are traveling through, and they're not even thinking about the possibility that this might be a messenger from the Lord. It's all about us. We're not worried about them. There's a spirit of unkindness that existed there. One of the statements that I have on here is there is a sign of larger character issues that are in play. And heart issues often show up in the little things first. There's going to be much more to this story, but it begins by looking at the fact that they no longer have compassion for those who are in need around them. Boy, when we lose that heart of compassion, we are no longer looking at people through God's eyes. We ought to be people that we are compassionate because we know how much compassion God has shown to us already. Even though there is an issue that is much deeper than just the compassion thing, that is the first sign that something is wrong. There is a wickedness among the people in Benjamin. We are then introduced to their violence, as it says that these wicked men come and they're banging on the doors and they're yelling. Basically, there is a riot that is beginning to take place. There is gang violence, and they are doing everything they can basically to get what they want, because they see these travelers as vulnerable. And often that's what happens in the midst of gang violence, is you've got individuals who are looking for the most vulnerable so they can take advantage of them. An interesting idea here is back in verse 20, where he says to them, "Hey, don't stay out here in the square, come and stay with me." This Ephraimite was likely very much aware of the nature of the people in the tribe of Benjamin, the people there in Gibeah. You can't stay out here, because if you stay out here, it's going to be a problem. So he invites them into his home, thinking perhaps they will be safe. The issue there is they apparently already were developing that reputation. This is not a one-off thing. This is apparently just who they are. Of course, as a part of this, we are introduced not only to their violent nature, but their sexual immorality, the sexual impurity that existed. The first thing that they're saying is, "Bring the man out so that we can have sex with him." Homosexuality is a part of it. It turns out that they end up not having sex with a man, they end up having sex with a woman, but the sexual immorality is still very much present. Sometimes we minimize sexual immorality to being one thing, but the truth is sexual immorality and perversion is typically a slippery slope. What ends up happening is individuals who have compromised in one area of sexual purity, it is so easy to just move on to the next one. And it's because, it's not that big of a deal. I've already compromised here. It's not going to make a difference if I compromise over here. It shouldn't surprise us that these very same people who are looking to have sex with this traveling Levite are so willing to sexually abuse a young lady basically all night long until the point of death. Interesting thought here. We talked about the fact that you have some of the wicked men of Gibeah, some of the wicked men of Benjamin. I wonder if there weren't other people like this Ephraimite who chose not to participate in the acts of immorality among the people of Benjamin. But they remained silent instead. Kind of reminds you of when the people cried out, "Crucify him," regarding Jesus. I wonder how many people stood by silent when they could have stepped up and said, "We cannot tolerate this wickedness." Clearly, there were some wicked people, but there were far too many other people who simply weren't willing to step up and do what needed to be done. Now, there's a twisted compromise that is then offered by this Ephraimite. Tell you what, I've got my virgin daughter here, and you can have her. And you can have his concubine for the night. First thing that tells you is, first of all, women were not considered as valuable. Men were important. They were significant people, but to take advantage of a woman like that, well, it's just a woman. There was a secondary type of respect. Women did not get the same kind of respect that men got in that day. Interesting, the hero of this story, you would think, would be the Ephraimite, because he rescues this family as they're traveling that night and brings them into his home. But to be honest with you, he's not that much of a hero. I know he pleaded on their behalf, but he then offers his own daughter to these men to abuse her and do whatever they want. He offers the concubine to abuse her and do whatever you want. He doesn't sound like much of a hero to me. It's interesting. Who gets sent out? Only the concubine. The daughter somehow ends up being spared. Now, my guess is the next morning, if she's aware of the conversation that has taken place and how close she was to being sent out to be abused by all of these neighboring men, she probably was looking to relocate the next morning. I don't want to stick around with Dad. He was too quick to offer me as a substitute for these traveling guests. But she is spared that night. That being said, the concubine is not. Actually, she is abandoned. It actually tells us that she is sent out by the Levite. She becomes what I would call a suffering sacrifice. She is sent out by the Levite, and likely reluctant, but she willingly goes. Now, maybe she's forced out there. Maybe she's saying, "I ain't going out there," and he says, "I'm bigger and stronger than you," and yes, you are. It doesn't tell us that. It just simply says that she is sent out. I'm sure she didn't want to go out there. But one possibility, one of the theologians that I read from in preparation for tonight, he said that perhaps she was willing to go in order to protect the Levite, the one that she had basically made a commitment to, and he had demonstrated love because he had gone back for her even after she went home. And perhaps there was a sense of gratefulness because he really did love me. To tell you the truth, he doesn't act like he loves her on this occasion. He sends her out, and she pays the price. Actually, they abuse her, sexually abuse her all night long, till finally, I don't know if they got tired or they had already used her up enough where they thought, you know what, she's good, and they actually let her go. When he comes out the next morning, he finds her basically at the doorstep. Says that she has basically grabbed hold of the threshold. You picture her laying on the ground, and it almost gives you this idea she was looking to get back home, thinking that if I could get back in there, I could be safe and they'll stop. The man comes out, and he shows such compassion. Get up. Let's go. There's no, are you okay? I'm sorry that this happened. Some of the reason, perhaps, why he responds with such a lack of compassion, perhaps he blamed himself. Obviously we put ourselves in the shoes of this woman and we consider how much she probably had to endure for the night. Did you ever think about what went through his mind throughout the night? Did he blame himself? Remember, he genuinely pursued this woman who had gone back to her father. This was someone that he apparently cared about, yet he just sent her out. Did he blame himself for what had taken place with her? Did he perhaps, as he lay there in bed, think to himself, man, I'm just glad I survived? Either way, he had time to process stuff all night long. And when he sees her that next morning, it's just, get up, let's go. I don't want to hear about it. I know what happened. I'm going to say that she was basically damaged goods to him at that point. Let me read the last two verses to you. Remember, she's unresponsive. She's basically dead already. In verse 29, when he reached home, because he's taken her basically with him, he took a knife and cut up his concubine, limb by limb, into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up. What this is, it's really crazy. You're going to tell me, first of all, you gave your concubine up to be abused by strangers. Now she's dead. You take her home. You're going to cut her up into pieces and then mail those pieces off to other tribes. What this is actually a call for justice, not against himself. Remember, maybe he shouldn't have sent her out there. This is a call for justice against the Benjamites. The Levite will cut her into pieces, and then he will send the pieces off to each different section among the tribes of Israel. It is likely that as these body parts were sent off, there was likely some type of letter or announcement included within each piece, simply as an explanation as to what took place. Why are you receiving these body parts? It's an interesting disbursement, though, of these body parts. There are 12 pieces that are sent out. How many tribes? Wasn't the tribe of Benjamin one of those 12 tribes? It is likely that they themselves also would have received one of the body parts with an explanation of what had taken place. And the question would be, why would he send it to them? There are two possible reasons. One, they were looking for a defense. You tell me how this is justified. You tell me why what they did was okay. It was acceptable. Apparently, there is no defense that is given. The second thing, perhaps what they were looking for is self-accountability. This happened among the people of Benjamin. You know who should hold them accountable? The people of Benjamin. Are you going to tolerate this? Are you going to let this happen? If not, maybe someone else will do something. There was no self-accountability. There was no response from within the tribe. It's simply, you know what, it is what it is. It happens, and just deal with it. Actually, the last statement that it said there in verse 30, it was talking about nothing like this has happened, not since the time that we left Egypt. Within that statement, there's actually a suggestion that we would understand if this would have happened in Egypt among the Egyptians, but not among us. What we see here, now remember, they've seen some really good examples. They've seen some really bad examples. They've been rescued. They've gone back to stuff. And the thing is, they've been called out to be different. But it seems like things have just gotten worse and worse and worse. What we see here among the people of Israel is they have put themselves in a really bad place. And there's about to be incredible accountability that's going to come. We're not going to look at the accountability tonight. It's coming. But it is because they have allowed compromise. We as the people of God need to make sure that we do not allow compromise. I know you're looking at this story and you're thinking, well, they were pretty bad. Like, we'd never do that. I'm going to tell you that there are things that have become acceptable in our culture and even in the church world today that when I was a kid, there's no way, and I'm not as old as I look sometimes, but 53 years, our world has changed a lot. And some of the, 52 years, sorry, I'm going to be 53 this year. Our world has changed a lot. And these things that seem like we could never allow those things to happen, maybe we could. We need to make sure there's no compromise in us. If the rest of the world wants to go in a different direction, we need to make sure we are who we're supposed to be. We need to be people of compassion, people of faithfulness, and people who honor the Lord with everything that we say and do. So, all right, dark story tonight, but it leads to some accountability, and there's actually a little bit more craziness that'll come with this too. So, all right, let's pray, and then we'll be done for tonight. Remember, it won't be next week, but after our little break for family camp, we'll go further into this. Father, thank you for the word. Thank you for the craziness. Some of this craziness serves simply to confirm that the stories in the Bible have not been whitewashed to leave out all the ugly parts. Lord, I pray that you'd help us to learn from these things. Father, help us to be faithful. Help us to be compassionate. Help us to be an example of love and to see people the way you see them, even when our world seems so dark, so crazy. May we be faithful to you, uncompromising. In Jesus' name, amen. It is a blessing to have y'all, and I did my best. You're only 1 minute late. I think I got 3 or 4 minutes from you on Sunday night, so we're just going to call it even. We're not going to worry about it anymore. So thank y'all for being with us tonight. Go in peace.